Welcome to the Trailblazers. I'm your host, Perry Rarick. The purpose of the Trailblazers is to share with you interesting and thought-provoking discussions I have with trailblazing business leaders. My guests are innovative. They're experts at what they do. And as is the case for today's guests, they often have interesting and rich backgrounds, and they're not afraid to challenge the status quo when there's big outcomes at stake. My Trailblazer guest today is Bob Feil, a technology and commercial leader with more than 20 years of experience helping pharmaceutical, biotechnology, and CRO, that's clinical research organizations, modernize clinical development and commercialization through enterprise software and digital transformation. Throughout his career, he has held leadership positions spanning solution engineering, technical strategy, product architecture, and commercial operations with organizations including IQVIA, Viva Systems, Clario, Sorcero, and Ledger Run. Bob currently serves as the Senior Director for Solution Consulting at Endpoint Clinical, where he works to streamline the execution of global clinical trials through innovative RTSM and IRT technology. Over his career, he has supported more than 100 enterprise software implementations, partnering with many of the world's largest life sciences organizations. Now, when I first mentioned his name, some of you may have said, boy, that sounds familiar. And if you're a baseball fan and a Toronto Blue Jays fan, I'm going to help you where you may have heard his name before. Before entering the technology industry, Bob spent 8 years in Major League Baseball after being drafted as a third baseman and then transitioning to become a pitcher with the Toronto Blue Jays. His unique journey from professional sports to executive leadership has shaped him in significant ways, and we're going to hear about that today. Bob, it's an honor to have you with us today. Welcome to the Trailblazers.
Wow, what an introduction. I love it. Thanks, Perry.
You've got a big story that warrants a big introduction. So we're going to have a lot of fun with this today. We're going to cover a lot of ground and a lot of different spheres. So our listeners are going to have a good time keeping up with all of this. You have what a life, and I don't want to sound like it's over. What a life you're having. This is incredible, the experiences you've had. You started out in baseball, were faced with some pretty big surprises right out the gates. We're going to get into that. But then you have spent 20 years, more than 20 years, at this very complex intersection of technology, innovation, clinical research. You spend every waking hour helping organizations leverage technology to improve the way clinical trials are done, both planned and executed. It's the last major hurdle as we bring, life-saving and improving therapies to patients. You're also passionate about leadership and developing leaders. You do that in your spare time or multitasking. So before we get into all of that rich discussion, I'm going to ask you about your current role. You work at Endpoint and you work closely with implementing RTSM. Talk a little bit about RTSM and what it means to the clinical trial planning and execution process.
So RTSM. So there's tons of acronyms in our space, right? I remember the first time I stepped into the space, I was like, what is that? There was 3-letter, 4-letter, 5-letter acronym. So RTSM. So what's it stand for, right? Randomization and trial supply management. So what is that, right? So simply put, it's really the technology that, clinical trials assign patients to the correct treatment group and ensure the right study medication is available at the right place and the right time. Sounds like a mouthful, but really it's just the right treatment for the right patient at the right time. So if you enroll into a clinical trial and you're a patient in the trial, it's to make sure you get the right medication at the right time for the right therapeutic area and the right disease state, whatever it may be. So it's basically aligning all of that. And it's crucial to a clinical trial success. I mean, crucial. Organizations really are particular when they're choosing an RTSM. It used to be, they changed the acronym a little bit, IRT, which is Interactive Response Technology. That's what it's been called for 30, 40 years. But ultimately, the platforms have become more robust, and RTSM seems to it's evolved over time, to say the least.
Yeah, you make it sound easier than it is. This is really hard stuff, getting all this lined up in time and place. And it really is. You use the word crucial. It's crucial. This is the framework that manages the entire process globally.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, basically, RTSM over the years was primarily transactional. And now it's become much more. It's become basically this connected operational kind of hub, right? This operational platform. And I know from my time here at Endpoint Clinical, it's something that we're really trying to redefine a little bit. Just to kind of really have that brain, that core operational for clinical operations and RTSM have that as our platform. So it's been interesting. It's been an interesting journey for me. I mean, I've worked across many, as we'll get into, many different clinical tech products as well as commercial tech in this space, in the life science space. But this one I see with the most upside in terms of innovation, especially with the advent of AI and other type things in technology, which have really catapulted to space in the past 3 to 5 years. It's
Yeah.
been unbelievable.
Yeah, we're going to get into AI in a little bit. This is a different, you mentioned, this is not a contractual relationship between you and the customer or partner. Maybe that's a,
Yeah, that's a good word.
this is this initial conversation you have with them is, can you talk a little bit about that and how that's different than this, contractual, I'm going to buy some SaaS and bolt it onto my, current processes.
Yeah, it's interesting, the sales cycle in technology with pharma, especially these big enterprise organizations. You have to partner with them, right? And my type of roles for the last 12, 13 years, I've been doing these solution consulting, sales engineering, solution engineering. It's all the same. Basically, I partner with the sales and marketing teams and kind of am that middle person, kind of the hub, I often say, between product engineering, sales, and marketing. And in my role and the way our companies partner with these organizations is the fact that clinical trials are complex, right? That they're very complex. They take very, very long to build and launch. There's so many variables involved and depending on the software you're selling, companies need trust. You need to establish trust. And there's so many vendors in terms of software vendors in the space. There's hundreds, if not thousands. And, especially top 50 pharma, the really large organizations, they have so many vendors reaching out to them about so many different things that they need to really feel comfortable. And not only does your product have to be good, the people, that's what I focus on. The people you have to be embedded in the organization, understand the processes, the architecture, everything about them and how their people operate in order to really for them to trust you. Trust is everything, right? Your software I've worked at companies where the software was so phenomenal, but it's all about the people, right? And building that trust and expertise. And that's where, when we do talk about AI, the people are the glue in this whole boom of revolution we're going through right now. And there's always a need for experts. And in my role, basically, it's usually lined up, and the people that work with me are basically the SMEs, so the subject matter experts around not only the product but also the technology behind the product, and really partner with the business development teams to kind of bring deals through to the closing line.
Yeah, well said. That you captured that very well. Yeah, it's complex, and it's about people and really taking the time to understand what they're up against and help them.
Exactly.
All right, so let's transition to the big one, AI. AI is everywhere. There's probably far more misinformation than information about it. But I want to tap into your experience at helping companies implement technology to solve problems, right? Over 20 years, you've been doing this. And how is AI different?
Oh, I mean, it's a big can of worms, right? Like you look, I kind of have a pretty vocal presence on LinkedIn, and I read constantly. I'm constantly trying to learn and trying to keep up with the pace of AI is interesting, right? Especially being a technologist, my whole career, it's moving so fast at such a fast pace, and everyone wants in, right? Every company has an AI initiative. Every vendor, every sponsor, every CRO, everyone has an AI kind of initiative, and what I've seen in at least the past 8 months to a year, is a lot of noise, right? Like, there's a lot of folks saying they're doing AI, but it's really just they're automating things, right? It's not true AI. Like, when you're talking about AI is the ultimate accelerator. That's why I look at it. I often say, in simple terms, it gives folks superpowers. but the human expert still remains the decision maker, right? And it's easy to say that, right? You'll hear the term human in a loop. I've heard that a lot. I was at an AI startup where I first got my first taste of AI about 5 years ago, and we kept hearing human in a loop because people were nervous, didn't understand it much. And as we move along here exponentially, the growth of AI, we're seeing more and more pseudo experts appear, right? And I was in the ground floor with AI, and I don't consider myself an expert by any means. Do I know a lot about AI? Yes. And I've done some really cool things with AI. But that being said, it's still everyone's learning as we go here. And as companies kind of have these AI initiatives, the biggest thing is I go back to it all the time. That the highest value of AI right now is not replacing the expertise. It's amplifying experience and expertise. That's what it's doing. And the simple terms I always say, it gives people superpowers. It's funny. I talked to our CTO yesterday, and we were talking for a while. And of course, he's a big techie CTO, and I always like kind of nerd out. And we were talking about it. And when you have a background, like my background in formal education has all been computer science, and having that core foundation has really, I mean, working with AI, it makes things that used to take me weeks to do just in my fun time, like when I build things or make different apps or whatever it may be, I can do it in an hour, 2 hours. It's unbelievable. And now you're seeing it applied to the business space. And some companies are doing some really, really amazing things, including where I am now, Endpoint, but it's not doing AI for the sake of AI, right? You don't want to complicate people's lives. You want to make them easier, simpler, more efficient, and ultimately save dollars too, if that's possible. So I mean, I could go on forever. It's so amazing. I'm such a fan of AI just because I've always been a techie. I've done so many things in terms of just in my downtime, and now having that tool at my disposal for everything from personal to business life, it's been amazing. But again, it's interesting, right? Like we could talk about like in life sciences, a highly regulated environment, just like the finance space, right? So you have to be very cautious. You have to be very, very measured when you're doing AI initiatives because people are nervous too. They don't know what's like, is this private information? Like how do we firewall this? Things like that. I mean, there's a lot of different moving parts, and to really nail it down and actually capitalize on it is it's a challenge. It is. Yeah. Every conversation is different. Every conversation with clients, with internal, external, they're all drastically different. But I always come back to the human, right? The human element. That's the key piece of all this. It always will be.
You started, so how would you recommend somebody get started? And I'm not talking about, like I use AI search applications to do research. It's much more efficient. I can get summaries and I can drill into areas that I want to explore more. But if I want to implement it with a business operation, how do you recommend, and maybe use clinical, of course, use clinical as an example, but how to get started? How would you recommend somebody to take the first step?
Yeah, I mean, I like to simplify everything, right? It's the nature of the roles I've been in, trying to simplify technology and how it fits in an organization. Or, I mean, oversimplify. That's what I like to do. And I feel like it really resonates, no matter how intelligent someone might be or if you simplify something, I always say I try to explain it to my 6-year-old, and if she can understand it, then I can use it in a meeting. That's what I try to do. But I think what we're seeing, like operationalizing AI, I'm seeing a lot of like target workflows. So if you look at when you look at some of these organizations across clean tech, commercial tech, whatever it may be, you have to look at where there's kind of efficiency gains. That's what I do internally too here. Where I am today and other places I've been, where I look at efficiency gain. I'm a huge efficiency kind of, I want everything done, prioritized, and done as quickly and efficiently as possible and complete as possible. So I think you look at holes where you really have these operational kind of drags. So like in clinical trials, there's a ton of, it's always been document centric, right? So documents here, and then they're passed on to here, and then to here. So if that workflow where you're going through with individuals or with teams or with sites or with sponsors, whatever it may be, if that can be tidied up and automated in some way with AI, where there's spots where automation becomes more of a speed thing and it speeds things up without losing what what word am I looking for here? That kind of completeness, really, because you don't want, because everybody says, well, AI hallucinates, AI makes mistakes. Of course it does, but AI is only as good as the human that's using it, or humans that are using it. So I think that when you look at operational, like targeted workflows, I see that as being right now. I mean, that's changed, right? Over the past like 6, 8 months, a year, you're seeing more and more companies kind of focus in on that. Where at first it was, it was AI to compose emails and summarize documents, like you said, and then it became more of agent work or agentic AI, where you're asking it questions and it kind of, you think it's reasoning, but it's not, it's kind of reasoning. It seems like it is, and now we're looking at like AI agents where they can do really complex tasks and you work with a lot of different things, and that's where it's getting interesting now. And now we're moving along from that, and companies are implementing all of these. So I think, ultimately, where do you get started? It depends on what your problem is. If you break it down simply, where do you see problems or gaps in your organization, whatever area you're working in, right? Whether it be RTSM, whether it be, your CTMS, your whole clinical platform, your clinical data, that's a big spot. Drug discovery. I personally see a lot of applications where AI could be really beneficial. But you have to identify those problems and look to solve those problems, and if AI can help with that. Because a lot of times what I saw about maybe 3, 4 years ago when I first started at an AI startup, I saw people just all the buzz around AI. How can we use AI in our organization? And they weren't looking at where it exactly fit. They were just trying to plug it in places where, oh yeah, it works great, and it doesn't, but it didn't really speed up and save money. And that's what I saw at first. But now you're seeing companies be very deliberate with their understanding and their decision making. They're being overly deliberate. They're being very, very, very measured and calculated. They're really understanding their requirements. They want to understand, like, okay, if we go with this vendor, if we go with this RTSM platform, is it going to solve this, and this today? And if it's not, then we're going to move on. But if at least the companies I talk to that are really on top of this, and you see this a lot in the life science space, because I've worked with some brilliant individuals across it, and they're really they're really experts in their field. Like every piece of software I've ever sold, you sell into a group of folks that are very well fine-tuned in that space. Like RTSM, IRT, I mean, I've already met some folks where I'm like, you breathe more RTSM than I'll ever know in my life. But I understand that. And I learned from these folks too. I mean, on both sides of the table, it's unbelievable wealth of knowledge in the life science space across the board. And so anyway, yeah, I think understanding your problems and where I can kind of solve those, or hopefully solve those, that's the best place to start. It sounds easy, but a lot of times people are blind to their issues or gaps in the organization or the processes. But if you can identify those, the tools have gotten so good that there's plenty of options to kind of solve those.
Yeah. Great advice. How you describe that is so meaningful. Goes back to what we first started talking about, was this is not a contractual relationship. You have to learn about your customer and really help them understand what their problems are, and then figure out, how to solve it. So, and a good test, is this solving a problem? So, awesome advice. That's really, great stuff. So if you can remember, you say your first introduction to AI was about 5 years ago.
Yeah.
When did you pause and say, man, this is really different. This is big. This is going to make a lot of changes.
Yeah, it was interesting, right? I joined a small AI startup about, I guess it was like almost 5 years ago. And that's when I left IQVIA. IQVIA, great organization, great CRO. I really had a great experience there. And I was in a good spot there, leading a pretty large global team. But I had this offer on the table come to me around AI, and it was a smaller startup, about 50 or so employees. And it was, to me, it was like, again, being a technologist and a techie, I was like, I got to look at this. And I remember seeing the software and being like, wow, this could be a game changer for me personally, as well as the space. Of course, there were some questions, but again, the technology, but AI wasn't like ChatGPT, OpenAI, Claude, Copilot. No, they weren't household. Gemini, no one knew. Like, I remember I was tinkering with ChatGPT around 5 years ago, or 4.5, whatever it was. And I remember when I got to the startup, I went there, and that's when I was exposed to like Claude and Anthropic's Claude. And I was like, oh my, there's more than one tool. I had no idea. And then I started getting deeper. Like I met Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI. We actually did, some brainstorming sessions together because it was so new. He was trying to partner with little startups that were like, oh, you're going to use our technology. How can, and it's amazing how far it's come now. But I remember thinking to myself, okay, this is kind of like I would, like you do, like search for things, summarize you couldn't even upload documents yet. You could just summarize things. It was basically a glorified Google search with some reasoning, like a little more targeted. But then I remember I searched for, like my test for AI early on was like, who is Bob File? Because my online presence from my baseball background is out there on the internet. And it would come back like he played for the Mariners and went to this high school. I'm like, this thing, talk about hallucination. But it did some things really well. And I think my moment where I was like, oh, wow, what honestly, I thought it was kind of, since I was at a startup, I was kind of really exposed. I was deep into it early. And then I started to hear, I would tell friends of mine, like a good friend of mine works in marketing, and I would tell her, you should use ChatGPT with some of your content just to kind of get a first draft, brainstorming sessions. And I remember that was like 3 years ago. And she was like, oh my God, you changed my life. She's like, I never knew anything about this Chat GPT. And I was like, okay. And then the masses started to hear about it, obviously, and started using it more and more. But I feel like for me, it was relatively recent, probably about 6, 8 months ago. I remember I wanted to kind of resurrect my website, right? So I have my own personal website and things like that. And I remember I wanted to kind of do it from scratch. And before I can build websites, you can use tools that were out there. It wouldn't take me that long, a couple days, tinker. My moment, I was sitting here on a Saturday morning, just like we are now, and I was sitting at my computer, my daughter's playing, and I said, I built it in Codex, which is part of ChatGPT on my machine. And I remember saying, okay, I want to rebuild my website. This is the current link. I want to change the domain. I want to do all this. And it built it so fast with content. Like it took all the content it knew about me over the years that I've been using it, and it put together this website literally in 10 minutes. And I was able to connect it to GitHub and do all this literally within a half hour. I had an up and running website, file.ai, in a half hour. And it
Amazing.
and I was blown away. Not that the simplicity of building websites pretty easy these days for anybody who works in tech, but how fast and complete it was with content, like video clips, everything within a half hour. And I was like, oh, this is it. And it's funny. There's like kind of two moments in there. That same weekend, I was working on. I was looking for a new job. I was searching, and I built a CRM for my job search. I had to connect to my email, connect to my LinkedIn, connect to all these different things, and it built a whole interactive interface in my web browser where I could see where I was with certain job interviews, and it did it. It did that in 15 minutes. And that day, those two things I did within a morning that would have took me, that website alone, just brainstorming the content would have took me a long time. And to put it together and have it up and going. And then I made revisions and it's connected, and it's just, I make revisions and it just boom, boom, boom. I don't have to pull file. I'm telling you, I remember sitting there being like, if it does this so easy, and then I've always used it at work, but now, especially at Endpoint, I'm doing some really cool things, internal, like we talked about workflows and internal processes and where there's gaps. It's amazing. It's game changer. But it goes back to my previous point. The human in the loop or the human expertise. If I didn't have the expertise of knowing what GitHub is and knowing how to connect to different pieces when you're building a website and how to use different understanding code just in general, not that I had the right code, but it helped me supercharge what I already knew. Like if I told you right now to go build a website using Claude or ChatGPT, be like, you could get there, but it might take you a little longer. So those types of things, they're just simple examples, but when you apply it to really complex problems, then we have a whole new ball game now. Like literally, it's changing, and it's happening so fast that you can't really keep up with it. You just have to use it and kind of learn organically as it grows, and it can really change your workflow, like personal workflow, and just in terms of how you work on a daily basis. It can make you X amount of times more efficient, and also you can get more done in a lot of different ways. A lot of them, I mean, so building that website and that app I made in a half a morning and that was about 8 months ago or so, 6, 8 months ago.
Incredible. You and I have, more so me, have lived through a lot of technology introductions to,
Mm-hmm.
society. You know, I grew up prior to computers, home computers, and then laptops and phones. And you've seen much of that too. I've never seen anything
No.
be adopted so quickly.
Yeah, no. It's funny. I was talking about that not too long ago as well. Like when I got my first, desktop computer, I think it was a junior in high school. But then the internet started when I was a junior, senior in college. I was a computer science major, so that totally transformed. It was the only thing you compare it to was the internet, because that kind of like changed the way society operates in a lot of ways, a lot of better ways, a lot of betterment, as much as there's negative things about everything, but the internet has changed life for good, I think, in a lot of ways. And I think AI, but we're seeing it at a much faster clip right now. Like you talk about, like we talk about phones on the wall, right? Like my daughter saw a landline phone on a wall in somebody's house, and she's like, "What is that? Like, what is that thing?" And she couldn't even comprehend what it was. She's like, and she's like, you can't even look up videos on that thing. I'm like, so the generation too, the generations that are in school now that are coming up, AI is all they know. Like my daughter, she talks to AI, like she'll talk to it and ask it to tell her story, and it just makes up a story in seconds and tells her a 5-minute story. So they're going to grow up in this, and it's going to, there's going to be some guardrails along the way that I mean, obviously, because I mean, everybody's watched Terminator. Um, but at the same time, I think there's a lot more good out of it than trying to be a optimistic person around AI. I think that the good outweighs any negative piece
Yeah,
with AI. Yeah.
yeah, I agree with you. All right, so we're gonna switch topics a little bit. Certainly still about business, but all right, 1998. We'll go back in history. 1998, you were drafted um, by the Toronto Blue Jays as a third baseman, and then you go to your first assignment, and it's not in a big metropolitan area. You go to your first assignment, and you're hit with a surprise. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, 1998. So I get drafted by the Blue Jays, the Toronto Blue Jays, in the 19th round, and signed my contract and everything. Got drafted as a third baseman. But they flew me out to Medicine Hat, Alberta. So for folks that don't know where that is, I didn't know where it was. It's about 2 hours north of Montana, the Montana border. So right above Montana, way out there. I growing up in Philadelphia, big metropolitan, big city, right? It was a little bit of a shock. I got to go out there, and I get out there, and remember the first practice. I was out there like a week early, and they told me that I was going to be a pitcher and to go run with the pitchers. And I know that the scout that signed me, when the Blue Jays signed me, they mentioned I might pitch. And, when you're in that kind of, like, I'm signing a professional contract, I'll do whatever it takes. But,
Yeah,
but actually getting there and having to do it, pitched minimally in college, it was like, okay, great. Now I'm at the professional level with all these guys coming from, the big schools like Stanford, USC, Florida. Like you're talking about some heavy hitters. And I'm like, I don't even know what I'm doing. I mean, so I'm out in Medicine Hat, middle of nowhere. It's a population, I don't know, it was 10,000, 20,000 people, living with a host family, which were incredibly nice. But it was a lot, and trying to learn a new position, really. And like we've talked previously, it was a lot. It was talk about adjustment. It was. I was lucky enough to have a great first season, really, and like a really eye-popping statistical good season. And I always say, if I didn't have that, if I had some serious failure that year, I would have been second guessing pitching. But things worked out. I often say they worked out because I played in the big leagues and the major leagues. But I often say, did it really work out? Because I'm talking to you right now about endpoint clinical. I could be sitting on a beach somewhere if I some of the salaries today, but. But yeah, so that was kind of like my first exposure to adversity, to say the least.
yeah.
Like real adversity.
Great lesson. Agility, facing adversity head on, kind of accepting, probably the excitement of, being a professional baseball player
Yeah.
helps a little bit with that, but nevertheless, you've got to figure it out. So you're there in Medicine Hat. And so the other thing you mentioned, I'll prompt this by saying you mentioned taking advantage of opportunities when they come. So you didn't miss. So they make you a pitcher, and you didn't start
Right.
right away. All right, you kind of hung out. Tell us a little. Can you tell us a little bit about that and the first time you actually got to take advantage of an opportunity?
Yeah, no, it's funny. I always say opportunity may not look like the opportunity you expected, right? I've always said that. And you don't always control those opportunities. And I look back, everyone looks back and you think about the opportunities. And it's funny when I was telling you in a previous conversation about when I was at Medicine Hat, I didn't pitch for the first 7 days of the season. So 7 days went by. I was sitting in the bullpen. I was a relief pitcher, and there's these guys from Ohio State, Florida, and I remember.
So wait, but what do you do when you're hanging out in the bullpen?
In the bullpen,
What's going on?
So for purposes of a publicly facing show, there's crazy things that go on in a bullpen at every level, even in the major league level. Most of it is, so I was a closer, which basically pitches the eighth, ninth inning in a tight, close game in the minor leagues. That's all I did was a closer. But ultimately, the first 5 or so innings, you're usually just hanging out, talking about anything, right? TV shows, anything. But then, then typically in a bullpen way it's structured, you have guys that have certain roles, right? Some guys pitch a 6, 7, some guys a long guy, short guy, whatever it may be. I know I'm the ninth inning in the minor league, so I know, okay, if it's 3 runs or less lead, I'm going to be in the game. And so right around the 6th-ish inning, you start to really focus in on, studying the hitters, studying the game situation, the outcomes, kind of who you're going to face possibly. I do the lineup in my head, like 7th inning, I'm like, all right, who will possibly up if we go 1, 2, 3, and I'm trying. And in the minor leagues, it's tough, right? Nobody really knows anybody. Every level you go up, you don't really know the players. At the big league level, you kind of study the players. They've been around, but there's not really a scouting report on minor league guys, at least back then. So it's always like I would see their tendencies from the game before. Now, this is where, and I could go off on a tangent, this is where I'm an intellectual, right? Like I always want to learn. So for me, having that wherewithal of kind of understanding and being able to study the game was the number one reason I made it to the big leagues, period. And I often tell people at the big league level, at the major league level, the level of, and we talked about a little bit, just not just intelligence, but emotional intelligence, emotional awareness of all these different factors is so high, the high EQ at the big league level. Even though you might see stories about this guy or that guy and he looks like he's just a goofball or whatever, I'm telling you, there's guys all throughout the minor league system that never make it past AA that should have been. Like talent, if you look at talent alone and raw talent, I played with guys that were just, I thought they were going to be a 10-time All-Star and they never get an A-ball. But you don't know at the time, right? It's all about, taking that opportunity. And it's funny to get back to that first game I got in. We had a closer that was closing, and he had blew a couple games, lost a couple games, and they put me in the 7th inning. I'll never forget, in Great Falls, Montana, middle of nowhere. Great Falls, Montana, if anybody knows it. I watch Yellowstone. I don't know where Great Falls falls in that universe, but Great Falls, it was Thirsty Thursday. It was like free beer, $1 beer night, and it was like 5,000 fans. I come from a small D2 school in Philly. We were lucky to get 50 fans at a game. So for me, this place is rocking, and it's in the middle of nowhere. And I got in the game in the 7th inning, and I remember just being, I wasn't nervous at all. I was annoyed I hadn't pitched up to that point. I was like, I'm going to just, if my arm falls off, I'm going to throw the ball as hard as I can, but focus on what I have to do. And like I told you previously, I struck out the side in the 7th, went back out for the 8th, struck out the side again. So I had 6 strikeouts in 2 innings. I was like, oh my goodness, what? Like I was surprising myself. And I thought they were going to bring in the closer, that they had bring it in. He was a big prospect, this and that. And they left me in the game. And I wound up striking out 2 of the last 3 hitters. My first outing, I got a save, and I struck out whatever it was, 8 out of 9 hitters. And then I was the closer the rest of the season. And I had a great year on paper. And I had said this, I tell people all the time, I was a 19th round draft pick. So back then, and not that it's 20 years ago, or 20 plus years ago, you had to really look impressive on paper. So when, senior management was looking at paper and seeing the outcomes of the games and seeing statistics, they want to see, eye-popping, where it's got to be, who's this guy? And I know in my mind, having the wherewithal, like I couldn't just be good. I had to be undeniable. And that was my focus. Every level I went, I had to show on paper. You look at the stat sheet and you'd be like, we got to look at this guy. Who is this? And that's eventually how I got to the big leagues, having that mentality and constantly learning. I had to learn how to pitch. I had books. They're still on my bookshelf here that Roy Halladay at the time, who was, a teammate of mine, friend of mine, he told me different books to read. Different folks told me different books. That ABCs of Pitching, Noel Ryan's Pitching Bible. I still have them. I would read through them just to get ideas of like, okay, because I knew how to be a hitter, and I knew how hitters thought, and I knew how I did not like to face certain pitchers for this, and this, and when they did certain things, and I applied that. But I also had to learn in the professional world, everyone's a great hitter. Everyone's the best of the best in the world. So it's we go back to the opportunities and making the most of them. I did not know I was going to be a pitcher. I did not know I was going to be a closer that year. But when I got the opportunity, I had to capitalize on it. And I think that's crucial for anything you do. And it sounds cliche and corny, but it's true. If you can see the opportunity when it's in front of you, that's the hard part, right? You might not even know this is an opportunity. I'm like, is this? I should do this. Should take that risk and chance and just do it. And then if you fail, you fail. And that comes with age and experience too. Like I take on more things now where I will probably fail, but I figure if it works out, it could turn into something big.
That's interesting. The hardest part is identifying or seeing the opportunity. That's interesting. What else can you say about that?
So I've missed some too, right? Like, so especially in my professional life, especially getting done pro ball and really trying to decide what's next, right? Like, you do something so long and you have to have so much discipline and consistency, hard work, everything. And then you get into kind of this professional world, which is a lot of things relate, but some things are different. And really trying to like, there's times when I look back and it's like, maybe I should have stayed at this place a little longer because I felt the next opportunity was going to be bigger and better, right? And that's not always the case, right? The people like say grass isn't always greener. I mean, there's some truth to that. But at the same time, if you don't take any risk, you never find out anything. And I think for me, it's really defined who I am across everything I've done. I've done it. Everything has been, if you look back at my LinkedIn or my resume or my CV, whatever, everything has been calculated. Every move I made has been extremely calculated. Even places where I didn't have a say in the matter and left, it was calculated while I was there to learn a certain aspect of whatever it may be and take that to my next role. And I think every step of the way, I've taken experience from each company I've been at, each thing I've done, and really put that together to make who I am today. And it's not done, right? Like I'm still doing that where I am now. It's going to help me where I am next, wherever that be, however long, wherever that is. But identifying the opportunities when they're in front of you, it's hard. Like you can identify them after the fact, like, and I should have did this, or I missed that on that. Like it's like you hear it all the time, especially in the startup world with tech. It's like you get a certain amount of equity, and then you leave a company, and then all of a sudden that company, boom, either goes public, and you're like, I should have that was an opportunity that you missed, obviously. But again, you don't have a crystal ball either, so you have to. Again, that goes back to my kind of analytical mind. I kind of analyze the situation, really overanalyze sometimes. I've gotten better at not doing that as much, and kind of making decisions, educated, well-calculated decisions, like minimize risk, and then go from there. That's kind of how I attack life, period. Has it burnt me? Of course. But the older I get, the more I'm learning from those experiences. It sounds so. It's everything everyone's ever taught me. It's like learn from your mistakes, learn from your failures. Yeah. But when you're going through them, you're like, what am I going to learn here? But it's not until after you really look back. So, it's a lot of cliche type things. But once you go through, like what I went through at the major league and baseball at a professional level, you see it all. There's not one thing. Like, you give up a game-winning home run at Yankee Stadium versus, you drop the ball on an email. It's a little bit different. Even though it can affect people, it's all what people perceive as important to them too. So some people don't have that reference point of pitching at Yankee Stadium, and I do, but some people don't have that. So you have to be empathetic to folks too. That's why dealing with clients in the sales cycle, you have to understand that I'm not using an email as the worst moment in life, but things have happened to people that are the down point of their life, but that might be not a big deal in your life. But as long as you're aware of that, I think it goes back to emotional intelligence. I've read tons of books on that. That's everything in the business world. EQ is everything. You can be building rockets at SpaceX, but if you don't have EQ, I mean, you're gonna stall, in my opinion. So yeah.
When you talked about the importance of looking good on paper, take advantage of those opportunities. You're looking good on paper, which helped you to think about outcomes all the time. And you said, I'm pitching in Yankee Stadium and I blow a save or something like that. There's an outcome associated with that. Business is the same. Certainly when you're in commercial operations, there's an outcome tag to everything you do every minute
Yep.
of the day. Can you,
Yeah.
yep.
Yeah, it's funny. It's like we talked about that. Like baseball's are very measurable. It's quantitative. You can quantify everything, right? Like people see your statistics, they see your results. Effort and preparation matter, of course, but ultimately you're evaluated on the outcomes, what happens on the field. And it does relate, right? Like in the business world, activity is not the final goal, right? Like you could be busy as doing things that, it's really comes down to is the real question is whether you help the customer, solve a problem or not. And that's the true outcome. And I think, you can put all the hard work and effort in and preparation, but outcomes matter. And for me, like you said, eye popping on paper, for me, I did all the prep and hard work you could possibly do. I prided myself. Like if you go back and talk to anybody from the Blue Jay organization that's still around with the Blue Jays or that worked with me, from trainers to GMs to on-field leadership, things like that, no one outworked me. No one. I don't care who it was. No one outworked me, and I made sure I outworked everyone. And I mean that. And people that work with me and know my 5 a.m. gym rituals, 6, 7 days a week. And that's just. But what comes down to is preparation and hard work, right? I could do all that. From a professional level in the business world, you have to do all that, right? But I think what it does is it minimizes. It kind of sounds like putting a bunch of words together, but it minimizes the risk of a bad outcome. What I mean by that is basically all the preparation, everything you do. Basically, when you get in a situation, you just execute. Nerves are gone, thinking out loud's gone, all that's gone. You can adapt and be agile, but if you do all that, it helps you minimize the risk that you're going to fail. That's the way I look at it, minimizing risk of failure. And sometimes you do, and you fall flat in your face. But I think really looking at the outcomes, and that's important, right? Because if I go back and look at my last couple roles, and I really take inventory of what were the outcomes and where did I not hit the mark, and if I can truly look in the mirror and really ask myself that, then I can make adjustments. And I think that's honestly that's what's put me in a position where I had a late career start, right? In terms of the business world, I started 9 years late. When I say late, after formal schooling, after college, and my ultimate goal was to catch up where my peers are, like in terms of financial success, quality of life, business success, things like that. And I had to put on the afterburn, like I had to really work hard, and that's when I took the role at Viva Systems, which is one of the best success stories in life sciences. I started early there and I learned a ton, but I took a lot of concessions financially, but I knew that this could catapult me to where I wanted to be. I wasn't going to be there for 20 years. I just knew I wasn't. I'm a builder. I'm curious. I constantly want to innovate. I constantly want to help companies get to the next level. And if I'm held back from doing that, I leave, period. And I don't hold that back. So yeah, I mean, I kind of go on and on, but it's true, right? Like outcomes matter, period. And I think if you can really look at outcomes and say, yeah, I missed the mark here, or my team missed the mark, or our company missed the mark here, what are we going to do next time to remedy that? And I don't think enough people do that. I mean, they say they do, but are you honest
Right.
with yourself? Like, are you truly honest with yourself? Because I think you'll make huge strides if you're truly honest with yourself. And it's hard to do. Nobody wants to do that. Nobody wants to admit they did wrong or they messed up. And I think I don't want to do it all the time for sure. Nobody wants to, but the more you do that, the more you can grow. And you can be 70 years old and still do that. There's no age limit. There's no time limit on that either.
Yeah. I want to ask you about the notion of continuous improvement. So you're an engineer. Continuous improvement is kind of an engineering term, but it can also be applied to us. You and I, everybody else out there, and you talk about, it's hard to look in the mirror and say, okay, well, why didn't I get this outcome? There's a pause and there's a reflection, and then there's what would I do differently? Can you talk a little bit about how you apply? I mean, you still had pitching books you spoke about. How do you apply continuous improvement to your business life?
Yeah, I think there's two parts really to that. So from a leadership standpoint, so when I lead teams, I mentor folks and mentor myself really. The one thing I really focus on, and this, I learned this from a manager way back when I worked at AstraZeneca right after I was done ball for a few years. I learned this from one of my first managers. He told me to read a book called Strengths Finder. It was a book, basically the gist was, working with people's strengths rather than identifying their weaknesses and trying to make those better. And I live by that mantra for myself and for anyone I've ever managed, ever led, anyone, friends of mine, because I think what happens is basically if you look at a person, especially when I inherit a team at an organization, I'll inherit folks. I don't know them really. And I'm very involved, like personally and professionally. I want to get to know them as a person. And one thing I always focus on, what do they do well? It's like everybody that has a role in any business does something right. They're in the job for a reason. You do something very good. Not everybody does everything great. And I always focus on what they do great and really lift that up and really utilize that, whatever aspect of the role in the business where it fits. And then what I find, and for me too, any weaknesses or any gaps you have in your own, your own self, they gradually start to get better as well. They come up. Whereas I've seen a lot of leadership focus on they're not doing this. Let's hone in on that and only that. And then what happens is that person doesn't have the momentum to feel like they're doing a great job. It's leadership 101 in my opinion, but I find out it's not leadership 101. It's basically, because if you really focus on what people do well, people want to have purpose. They want to feel good. They want to feel good. Like, especially in a lot of roles that are remote. I've worked remotely for quite a while. In a remote environment, you don't have that, they say the water cooler conversation. You don't have that one-on-one time where you're just catching somebody in the hallway or thing like that. So you have to be really conscious of making people feel valued. And once they feel valued, they'll do anything. They'll jump off a building for you. Like, they really will go above and beyond. Because I know that's what I do. When I feel valued and I feel a part of an organization that like my input matters, I'll go above and I'll do even more for you. I'll go out of my way. But that's not always the case, and that's where it can be challenging. But if you can do that for yourself, I think it's crucial. So that's the strength finder piece. Like, really work with someone's strengths and as well as yourself. I think that's when you say looking in the mirror and kind of like, what do I do really well, and really bring that forward and really, you want to keep learning and keep getting better at other things, but whatever you do really well, continue to kind of hone that and do it better than any. It's like playing at the major league level. You got to be better than anybody else in the world, which is a big task, right? That's why there's only been 22,000 players ever in the history of Major League Baseball. But you got to apply that same mindset where if I'm doing this really well, I want to be better than anyone ever to do it. And you obviously probably won't get there ever, but with that kind of goal in mind, you can really, catapult yourself, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. That's so meaningful. Your focus on strengths and illuminating them in others, right? So important. I agree with you completely, by the way. So I love your approach to what I think is leadership, not just an approach to leadership. One final question, something you brought it up, emotional intelligence, so important. You said it's the most important thing in what you do. Can you talk a little bit more about that and how you begin developing it? How do you recognize it in yourself? How do you develop it and how do you sustain it? How do you continue to work on that?
Yeah, I think it starts at a young age, right? When I compare it to like baseball, when I started, I think sports are great for this. Really, sports are anything, but I say that my daughter is really into piano and learning like formal lessons and things like that. And she's 6. But those types of things where it takes discipline and consistency, I think like with baseball, pitching wasn't just physical, right? Like everybody looks at athletes as just physical. But there's so many things that come into play, like reading the hitter, communicating with the catcher, understanding the coach, staying aware of the situation you're in. That's EQ, right? That's emotional intelligence, where it's the same is true in work and business, right? Like when you're working with customers and the team, it's like you have to listen. Like listening is a great skill that a lot of folks don't always do well. And when to challenge and when to simplify messaging, things like that, like really adjusting your approach, being agile, adjusting your approach. Like in technology, the best technical answer is it's not helpful if you can't communicate the way that people understand. So know your audience. Like if I'm explaining something, talking about APIs, GitHub, and all these different things, and like microservices, like really techie type stuff. If I'm talking to you, for example, you're not, maybe you know about these things, but if I'm talking to
No, you're right. I don't.
So you have to be able to kind of simplify, pull back the curtain and really kind of understand people. And it's not easy to do because everybody looks at a lot of folks look at people and communicate with people like they're just like them. Like nobody's like you, right? Like nobody's like me. And once you learning that along your journey, like I didn't pick up a lot of these things until after my baseball career, when I look back on my baseball career and how much it did help mold these things into me. But in the time, especially in my 20s, I was just like laser focused, run through walls, work as hard as I possibly can, and I'll get there. Where I was getting better, like it's funny in baseball, it's the same thing, right? Like I say, eye-popping stats on paper, but like when the GM or field director comes in town for a couple of days, getting to know them, talk to them, hey, how you doing? Just try to really make them understand like me as the person. And I think that's crucial to having an understanding of how other people operate, where you really kind of you have to be like almost a chameleon, and because not everyone's like me. And it's taken me years to learn this because I can come off as very intense, but it's not intensity. It's really just excitement and just like I like to get things done. But I know not everybody's like that. Everybody does it in a different way. And the sooner in life you can start to see those things. I mean, I've worked with some great like kids right out of college. And they're just the way they're on top. I'm just like, if I was like that at that age, God knows what I'd be doing now. Um, I mean, there's all ages and shapes and sizes that really get this knowledge. For me, I feel like it's been like a gradual, and I'm still trying to get better and better at it, right? Like I've worked at different size, different, all different kinds of companies, right? And every company operates differently, different folks, different people, everyone's so different. But having those experiences and bringing the good, okay, like endpoint, for example, and using where I failed in the past or where I saw teams falter in the past and kind of saying like, okay, instead of going there, I can kind of shift my thinking and in my opinion, wherever I am working currently, I can really take those experiences and apply them because I'm a learner, right? Like I constantly want to get better, which is a blessing and a curse, right? I always say back in my baseball career, I tried to learn a split finger fastball and I wound up causing all kinds of injuries, and ultimately it was that was the demise of my baseball career. But I want to get better, and you got to choose wisely, right? Like if you're doing something great, it's like if it ain't broke, don't fix it type deal. Like continue to do that great, but know when, it might take a downturn. It's like, so there's so many things to EQ. There really is. You just have to be able to learn quickly and focus on basically what's next. And you don't always know what's next. It's like, you just don't. It's a difference between having me talking to you today. If we had a scripted book of 20 questions and you would just ask and I would answer, ask and I would answer, doesn't come off as genuine, right? It comes off as robotic. And I think if you
wouldn't be much fun.
Exactly, right? Like I want people to listen and be like, oh, that's interesting. That guy's interesting. Let me look at his LinkedIn. Oh, let me hire him for this next big role. Things like that. But it's, I just stay true to who you are too. I mean, it sounds again really cliche, but I think it took me a long time to realize that, especially when I transitioned from baseball into the corporate world. I had a certain perception of what business professionals act like and who they are. And I felt myself being hamstrung of being someone I wasn't. And I think you can blend it. You can be professional and be yourself as well. And I think that's what I ultimately become, especially the last 10 or so years. I've really this is me. I mean, not everyone's going to like you. Not everybody's going to get along with you. But for the most part, if you get things done and you work well with people, it works out.
Great stuff, Bob. What an interesting life you're in the midst of. Great stuff. Bob, how can our audience contact you?
So ultimately, I have my own website, bobfile.ai. That's where I basically I stay close to baseball in a lot of ways on the side, especially in the Philadelphia tri-state area, Philadelphia, New Jersey, Delaware. Really just in terms of leadership and discussing things with different coaching groups and things like that, and working with kids, depending on the situation, doing clinics, camps. But I also incorporate a lot of things around my technology and AI. There's been a convergence between really analytics and anybody that follows baseball, analytics and data with baseball now. And I think that kind of that coercion between the two aspects of AI, big data and baseball, it's kind of like I love it. But ultimately, I have a lot of things on there about my background, about AI, about technology, about baseball. just to kind of, it's kind of like my portfolio of kind of services pseudo offered or so to say. But and I'm currently at Endpoint Clinical. It's I believe it's endpointclinical.com. I'm new here. I've been here about a couple of weeks. Great company, great people so far, and it's been a good journey. So
Yeah.
that's really, and anybody can find me on social media too. I mean, I have a pretty strong presence on LinkedIn from a business perspective. If I get to
That's
know
how
you,
we connected. We
yeah,
found each other
exactly.
on LinkedIn.
Exactly.
You're pretty
Exactly.
active on there. So really,
Yeah.
yeah, very interesting posts that you've had. They're always
Yeah.
thought-provoking. Yeah.
Yeah. It's really helped me connect with a lot of folks that, I mean, the amount of relationships I've built over the years, just like you, like an email from someone like, oh, I'm thinking, like, why are you there? Or what are you doing there? We're thinking about doing it. And then next thing you know, we meet for coffee or we have a call and I stay friends with them for life. And,
Yeah.
you know, you never know, right? And it's like how I ended up at Endpoint. I worked with our CEO years ago and he became kind of like a mentor to me. And here I am. So it's been a
Well,
journey.
Bob, yeah, thank you very much for being with us today. Great stuff. Bob File, great, interesting background that you've heard about. He's currently with Endpoint Clinical, helping anybody involved in clinical trial operations to plan and execute cleanly, overcoming those slowdowns that we talked about. And it's the last big hurdle. You're so close to success, you don't want anything to go awry. So reach out to Bob for some help, and I'm sure he can help you. So Bob, thank you for being with us, and thanks for being a trailblazer.
Yeah, thanks, Perry. I appreciate it. It was great talk.